Hi, welcome to the 4-week wellbeing series for the ethnic minority communities community. Tonight we're going to talk about nutrition, and we've very kindly got Sarah Trimble with us, who'll do a presentation, and then we can open up to some Q&A if we've got any questions. I'll hand over to Sarah and she can introduce herself.
Thank you, Carla. My name is Sarah Trimble and I'm a nutritional therapist based in Northern Ireland. But I do a lot of work with the Fertility Network around the UK, thanks to the wonders of modern technology. So tonight we're really going to take a bit of I would like to just do a bit of an overview of what I would see as like the fundamentals of nutrition to support fertility and reproductive health. Really just back to basics, and some of the basics that we often get overlooked, I think, sometimes with all the information that's out there. And I do have a few slides that would really take a specific look at the relationship between certain ethnic minorities and maybe the imbalances that you may be predisposed to because of your ethnic minority, your genetic background, and how maybe those can be addressed. So let me just share my slides here. Here we go. Hopefully this will come up. There we go. And we'll start from the current slide. So nutrition and lifestyle for fertility and conception. So I'm just going to check can everyone see that going forward? Is that okay? Forward and back? Because last time I was recording and no one was able to see. Is that okay, Carla? Can you see it move?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay, great. Okay. So nutrition and lifestyle for fertility and conception. So really we want to look at the fundamentally important nutritional aspects of your diet, of your lifestyle, and how that can affect your reproductive health and fertility. So whenever a client comes to see me and we're working together on boosting fertility, reproductive health, these are the things that I always make sure are addressed either through diet or lifestyle or both, essentially, and supplementation as well. So we're going to look at 4 key areas: the importance of antioxidants in your diet and potentially through supplementation, how to eat to balance blood sugar and why that's important for your reproductive health, key nutrients for fertility that may often get overlooked, and the importance of avoiding stress and improving sleep. And then, as I said, I want to take a little bit of a closer look at ethnicity, your genetic background, and how that might impact your fertility as well. So antioxidants I would classify as the most important nutrients for fertility. And antioxidants, if you've never heard of them, although you probably have, are nutrients and substances that we find in plant foods that protect our cells from damage from a type of unstable molecule called a free radical. So free radicals are unstable molecules that are produced because of UV radiation, because of inflammation, because of UV light. So an example of free radical damage is actually sunburn, and that is free radical damage on account of UV light. And we also will get free radicals produced because of smoking or alcohol intake. So there's a lot of reasons why our body might be exposed to these free radicals, but antioxidants are the protective substances that protect our cells from the damage of free radicals. So we have to think of them as our body's protector that protects our cells. Reproductive tissue, and especially sperm cells and female egg cells, are very vulnerable to free radical damage. So out of all the cells in our body, they're some of the most vulnerable to free radical damage. So to protect these cells, we really need the antioxidants. Free radicals can also impact DNA and damage DNA specifically. And obviously this can potentially negatively impact reproductive health, because DNA health is really key when we're talking about our fertility and reproductive health. Damaged DNA can result in reduced chances of conceiving and also reduced chances of achieving a healthy pregnancy. So antioxidants really important for keeping those reproductive cells healthy. So interestingly, we can measure exposure to free radicals in the reproductive organs, and high levels of free radical damage is associated with poor egg quality. Sperms are very susceptible to free radical damages as they are coated in a fatty membrane. So sperm cells are essentially just DNA with a tail, but sperm cells actually lack DNA repair mechanisms. So if the DNA that's in the sperm gets damaged, it's very difficult to have that repaired. So very, very vulnerable to these free radicals. So for sperm health, antioxidants become really important. High levels of free radicals in the follicular fluid that surrounds the follicle that becomes the corpus luteum will result in reduced chances of conception in assisted conception. So whenever we measure these levels of free radicals, we know how damaging they can be to both egg health and sperm health. And why are free radicals produced? Where are they coming from? So free radicals are naturally produced in our bodies every day. They're produced as the byproduct of normal metabolism. So as you and I are all sitting here and our metabolism is working, it's producing free radicals as a byproduct, but also exposure to UV radiation. So for example, sunburn, pollution, smoking and drinking alcohol, or even exposure to heavy metals in chemicals or traffic fumes, all can produce free radicals. However, this damaging action should be halted by antioxidants. So if we have enough antioxidants present in our food or being produced by our bodies, we will be able to prevent free radical damage to our body tissues. If we don't have enough antioxidants, we're said to be in a state of oxidative stress, and that's when damage will occur. So free radicals aren't always damaging if we have enough antioxidants to protect the cells. And this diagram is just a really good indicator of how it's this fine balance between antioxidant levels and free radical balance levels, whether we experience this damage to cells or not. So where do free radicals come from in our diet? So in addition to UV radiation, we can actually also consume foods that will then result in free radical production. So deep fried food or food cooked at very high temperatures, such as takeaways, snacks, snack foods and crisps, are all a source of free radicals. Convenience foods such as biscuits and crackers are cooked at very high temperatures in industrial ovens, and they often have sources of free radicals. You'll sometimes see it referred to as acrylamide, which acts as a free radical in the body. Sugar, so excess sugar consumption will lead to free radical production, and alcohol. So whenever alcohol is broken down in the body, a substance called acetaldehyde is produced, and that acts as a free radical and damages DNA. So where do we get antioxidants in our diet to protect our cells from this damage? And I love this picture because it pretty much sums up almost every source of antioxidants you can have. You've got coffee, which interestingly is a really potent source of antioxidants. All of your berries, your pomegranates, blueberries, blackberries, garlic, dark chocolate, your spices like turmeric, tomatoes for lycopene, chilies, chili peppers, all fantastic sources of antioxidants. As plant-based foods are the main sources of antioxidants, having a wide variety of plant-based foods in your diet is really key. Spices, especially those found in curries, like your ginger and your turmeric, cumin, cinnamon, all excellent sources of antioxidants. So incorporating spices regularly into your diet is really important. Eating vegetables and fruit, such as about 5 portions of vegetables daily and 2 of fruit. So that whole 5 a day rule is really not sufficient to meet your antioxidant needs. And good fat, so extra virgin olive oil is essential to support antioxidants. And what's really interesting is about using extra virgin olive oil to dress salads or to dress your vegetables. Not only does the extra virgin olive oil contain antioxidants like vitamin E and other antioxidant substances like oleocanthal, when you dress your vegetables with extra virgin olive oil, you'll also enhance the uptake of antioxidants from those vegetables and salads. So a salad dressed with olive oil will provide much more antioxidants than if it wasn't dressed with olive oil. So that's a really interesting way we can really up our antioxidant intake by incorporating olive oil into our diet on a regular basis. So what are easy ways to increase your antioxidant intake on a regular basis? Drink a few cups of green tea, red bush tea, or herbal spice teas daily. Ideally, caffeine-free would be good after sort of midday. A small serving of dark chocolate daily, and we're talking about cocoa content of at least 75%. Chocolate with a high cocoa content is one of the most concentrated dye sources of antioxidants, or even using cocoa. As I said, serve your vegetables with olive oil or your salads with olive oil. Have curries or spice stews, such as tagines, a few times a week. Mushrooms, interestingly, are often overlooked as a really potent source of antioxidants, but mushrooms actually contain an antioxidant called glutathione that we know plays a really important role in sperm health, and it's highest in shiitake or porcini mushrooms. So incorporating those into your diet a few times a week is also fantastic. And don't always eat your vegetables raw. For example, roasting tomatoes and peppers increases the antioxidant content of those vegetables. In fact, roasted tomatoes or tomato paste or cooked tomatoes are a really rich source of an antioxidant called lycopene, which has been shown to really support fertility health and sperm health for men. With a lot of my fertility clients, I'll often recommend that the male client will take a dessert spoon of tomato paste, preferably organic, drizzle it with olive oil and eat that either off the spoon if they like it or on a cracker daily. And that is an excellent way to get a really potent source of lycopene into your diet on a regular basis. The olive oil is essential because the lycopene is fat soluble. So that little drizzle of olive oil helps you absorb the lycopene from the tomato paste. And essentially it boils down to eat more veg. There's just sometimes what I say nutrition comes down to eating more veg. And if you just look at this plate, this is a lovely way to sort of demonstrate how to get more antioxidants in by filling up half your plate with veg, using a lot of different colors. You know, here you've got orange, green, red, purple. And antioxidants are often different colors. So whenever you eat a variety of colors of vegetables, you're going to get a variety of antioxidants in your diet. Interestingly, whereas lycopene is really important for male fertility and sperm health, beta carotene, the orange pigments in things like sweet potatoes and butternut squash, is really important for egg health. So that's one that I always focus on with my female clients. Eating maybe more squash and pumpkin, sweet potato is a lovely way to support egg health. So moving on from antioxidants, I want to talk a little bit about the importance of addressing your sugar intake and why insulin, the hormone that balances our blood sugars, is really essential, important to address in fertility and reproductive health. So a diet rich in antioxidants is one of the most powerful ways that our diet can support our reproductive health and fertility. That's number one thing to look at. However, a diet that's high in sugar and refined carbs can interfere negatively with hormone balance and reproductive health. So cutting out sugar and refined carbs from your diet is another essential change to boost fertility. Insulin is the hormone released by our body in response to the consumption of sugar and carbs. So we eat a meal that contains a lot of carbs, we eat something very sugary. Our body picks up on the blood glucose that's released into the bloodstream, and our pancreas will release insulin in response. Insulin's job is then to get the sugar out of the bloodstream and into the cells to be burned for energy. Sugar and carbohydrates broken down into glucose, and insulin then carries this glucose into our cells and muscles and brains to be used for energy. Without insulin, we would not be able to use energy from these foods. So what's the problem? It sounds like insulin does a good job. So where is it problematic for our fertility and our reproductive health? The problem is that our diets have become higher in sugar and refined carbohydrates over the years. A lot of people say since we've started to focus on low fat, we've been starting to eat higher sugar and higher carb diets. When we eat high sugar foods and carbohydrate-based diets, we produce higher levels of insulin to deal with the glucose produced. So the more carbs we eat, the more carb-based meals, the more glucose will eventually end up in our bloodstream, and we need to produce more and more insulin to deal with that glucose and get it out of the bloodstream and into the cells. We're producing even more insulin, and even though insulin is a hormone that manages our response to food, it can also interfere with our sex hormone balance. So insulin, as much as its role is getting the glucose out of our bloodstream and into our cells for energy production, it can, if we have high levels of insulin, it can really interfere with our sex hormone balance. Insulin leads to high testosterone production in women, and this imbalance is a key feature of PCOS. So women dealing with PCOS, about 80% of them are producing too much insulin, and that is one of the driving factors behind their high testosterone, their high androgen levels that can then interfere with ovulation. Insulin reduces levels of a carrier protein called sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG for short, and that helps the body manage the action of estrogen and promotes estrogen balance. So if sex hormone binding globulins levels are low, that means you have higher levels of free estrogen, which can lead to estrogen progesterone imbalances or estrogen dominant conditions. High insulin levels also interfere with the signaling of follicle stimulating hormone from the pituitary to the ovaries, potentially interfering with ovulation. And we also know that research on women undergoing IVF found women with highest insulin levels produced lower quality eggs. And this was also found for men. The men with higher insulin levels had lower quality sperm. So quite a few ways that too much insulin as a result of too much carbs and sugar in your diet can lead to sex hormone imbalances, but also potentially interfere with egg and sperm quality. So how do you reduce insulin levels from your diet? So I always say start looking at your carb intake and swap your carbs. So swap white fast release carbs for slow release carbs. So look for whole grain, slow release carbs as much as possible in your diet. Reduce the overall amount of carbs in your diet. Swap carbs for vegetables. So I always say to people, fill up half of your plate with veg and a quarter of your plate with carbs, and you'll be sort of reducing your carb intake and replacing it with veg. And consider doing a sugar detox. Try if you are a real sugar addict and you find that you really rely on sugar to get you through the day because, because maybe you really get energy slumps around 3 p.m. Maybe you really feel you need sugar to keep you going at work. Cutting out sugar completely for 10 days has been shown to break the sugar addiction cycle. So if you feel like sugar's a real crutch, you're always craving chocolate, try that 10-day sugar detox and see how you feel. Most people start to feel like the sugar cravings go by the end of the first week, even though the first 7 days can be quite tough. So how do you eat for blood sugar balance? So a number of small dietary changes can have a massive impact on our blood sugar levels throughout the day. And this can lead to a more steady blood sugar level, and that reduces our insulin levels. So if we keep our blood sugar steady, we don't eat in a way that causes blood sugar spikes, we won't have to produce so much insulin to deal with the blood sugar. Number one rule for blood sugar balance would be to eat a source of protein with every meal and snack. That's because protein slows our digestion, and this results in a slower and steadier release of glucose from a meal. So protein with every meal and snack, and your protein sources are obviously things like meat, fish, chicken and poultry, nuts, seeds, dairy products are your main sources of protein, and also beans and lentils. So think every time you're eating, think, am I including a source of protein with this meal? Don't skip meals and avoid having coffee to keep you going, because this will cause blood sugar levels to spike and then drop. So it can also be exacerbating blood sugar imbalances. Also watch out for healthy snacks that are actually high in sugar. So a lot of food companies try and claim that their snacks are healthy for you, but whenever you actually look at the ingredients, they're really high in sugar. So that would be things like Nature Valley bars, breakfast biscuits, dried fruit, and even fruit juice. And moving on from that, don't ever drink your sugars. And that would be in things like fruit juice, fizzy drinks, or even like coffees with syrups. Sugar in liquid form directly spikes your blood sugar and will cause a really exaggerated insulin response. So bad news for your blood sugar control. Fruit juice, a lot of people start the day with a glass of fruit juice, but I really don't recommend it, because even though a glass of, say, orange juice might provide you with some vitamin C, you've got the sugar of a few oranges, and that is going to spike your blood sugar in the same way as a fizzy drink, even though it seems that much more nutritious. Try and avoid meals that are dominated by carbs, for example, risotto, pasta, pizza. If you are having a dish of pasta or risotto, you do try and make sure you're incorporating a good amount of protein into that meal to balance out. So avoid things like pasta with just a tomato sauce and no protein in that meal. And the spice cinnamon is a really interesting spice because it's known to help reduce blood sugar levels after a meal. You can add it to porridge or drink cinnamon tea, and it really reduces insulin levels. And it's actually naturally sweet, so it's another lovely way to battle sugar cravings. Having a cup of cinnamon tea after a meal instead can bring down your blood sugar levels and help to satisfy that sugar craving without you reaching for a biscuit. So just some swaps for your meals that would help you to balance your blood sugar. So instead of crunchy nut cornflakes, have porridge with nuts and seeds. Instead of white toast with jam, why not have whole grain rye toast with peanut butter? Instead of a chocolate bar, try a few squares of dark chocolate with a handful of nuts. Instead of a biscuit, have oat cakes with hummus. Instead of a banana, have your apple with a handful of almonds, and your almonds there will be providing you with your protein. Instead of a white bread sandwich, choose a whole grain wrap or pita bread sandwich. Instead of pasta with tomato sauce, have pasta with tomato sauce and meatballs. Instead of steak and mashed potatoes are a fast release carb, have steak with potato wedges. And instead of your risotto, think of having maybe something like chicken curry and a serving of brown rice. So easy ways you can swap meals, just always incorporating slow release carbs and protein with every meal. And just moving on, I want to talk a little bit about important nutrients for reproductive health. So these are nutrients that I will always try and optimize for my clients to make sure that they have enough to support their reproductive health. And these are nutrients that I think deserve special attention, not only because they're so key for fertility, but often because they are often deficient in people's diets or for various reasons. So we want to make sure we're getting enough of these nutrients from your diet or a quality supplement. This is one reason why it's important not to undertake extreme exclusion diets or to cut out food groups when you're trying to conceive without obviously professional advice, as it can lead to nutrient deficiencies. So, you know, I see a lot of information online suggesting that you cut out this, cut out that, to support your fertility health. And that may be the case. For example, for some people, cutting out gluten is beneficial for their reproductive health. However, cutting out gluten in a healthy way that makes sure that you aren't cutting out, that you're not reducing your fiber intake, that you're not reducing your intake of magnesium, can be difficult without proper guidance from a professional. So vitamin D, starting off with vitamin D, a very common deficiency in the UK, and it's known as a sunshine vitamin because it's pretty much impossible to get enough vitamin D from our diets. We're reliant on the action of sunlight on our skins, producing vitamin D in our body. In Northern Ireland, where I live, we all tend to be deficient, and depending on where you're living in the UK, depending on how far north, you may be more inclined to be deficient as well. Women with lower vitamin D were found to have reduced chances of conceiving and increased chances of miscarriage. Vitamin D is a natural anti-inflammatory and a natural immune modulator. So potential reasons why lack of vitamin D can increase risk of miscarriage. Men with low vitamin D have lower testosterone levels and lower sperm number, but supplementing with vitamin D was shown to improve both those parameters, so shown both to improve testosterone and sperm number. So I always recommend my clients start by testing their vitamin D levels and then aim to reach optimal but not sufficient levels. So you might have your levels tested and they come back, oh, they're sort of on the borderline, but you're told they're okay. I wouldn't agree with that. I'd say you want to make sure you've got those optimal vitamin D levels to support your reproductive health. And you can get lovely little at-home vitamin D testing kits for around £30, so you can always check and monitor your own levels. Iodine is, for some people, as important as folate for female fertility, but often overlooked. Iodine is a mineral we don't really talk about, but it could be as important for female fertility as folate, and a lot of women are deficient in iodine. It's essential for thyroid function, and we know that thyroid hormone support conception and baby's development during pregnancy. Iodine also plays a role in estrogen balance and can help balance out estrogen in estrogen-dominant conditions such as endometriosis or fibroids. However, and this is quite an interesting factor, is the relationship between iodine and thyroid health is complex. So if you have an autoimmune thyroid disorder where you're producing antibodies against the thyroid, or such as Hashimoto's, too much iodine could actually be harmful to your condition. So you don't want to be supplementing very high levels of iodine if this is the case. So again, this is why it's really important to always seek proper advice before supplementing very high levels of nutrients. And a very important source of iodine in our diets are dairy products or eggs. So anyone who's avoiding dairy or eggs because of their maybe they're vegetarian or vegan could be potentially low in iodine in their diet. Zinc, probably one of the most important, if not the most important mineral for male fertility. Now, it's also important for female fertility, but male fertility, it's really key. Zinc deficiency alone can negatively impact male reproductive health. Zinc is needed for testosterone production and the sperm production process. So a lack of zinc has a real negative impact for men. The best source of zinc is animal products, especially red meat. Therefore, vegan and vegetarian diets tend to be low in zinc. And I would even say I see a lot of clients who don't eat a lot of red meat. They choose more protein sources such as poultry or fish quite a lot of the time. They mistakenly avoid red meat because they think it's unhealthy and often aren't getting enough zinc because of that. So very important to make sure you're getting bioavailable sources of zinc, not just vegetarian sources. And folate and B12, and I've included these together in this slide because they go together in the body and they work together in the body. So folate is probably the one nutrient we're all familiar with when it comes to fertility nutrition. And, you know, almost every client who comes to see me when they're trying to conceive is already taking folate, even if they're just taking it on its own without B12 or without a multivitamin. We know folate is important for nervous system development during pregnancy, but has other important roles for fertility. For example, folate together with B12 is essential for the production of healthy DNA. And as I mentioned earlier, healthy DNA is absolutely central to healthy reproductive health and conception. Together, B12 and folate also support a process called methylation. And methylation is a body process that reduces levels of something called homocysteine. Higher levels of homocysteine in your bloodstream are associated with reduced chances of conceiving and having healthy pregnancy. It's also important to realize that folate doesn't work alone in the body, and we need B12 too. You need to try to always find folate in the folate form in your multivitamin rather than folic acid. It means it's ready for the body to use. Around 40% of the people in Ireland, where I live, can't convert folic acid to this active form, so they need to supplement with this active form, and that's actually a genetic defect. Folate is present in beans and lentils and vegetables, especially green leafy veg. The word folate means leaf. However, B12 can only be found in animal products, and B12 deficiency is the most common nutrient deficiency for vegans and vegetarians. I would also say B12 and folate are also quite hard to absorb as nutrients. So anyone who suffers with indigestion or IBS may be at risk of low folate and B12 because they may have poor absorption via the gut. And your good fats, your omega-3 fats. So low-fat diets are not a great idea when trying to conceive, but I meet a lot of people who are afraid of high-fat foods. In fact, it's a good idea to try and increase good fats in your diet while trying to conceive. Omega-3 fats reduce inflammation in the body, and higher levels of inflammation are known to reduce chances of conceiving. So if you want to know what is the most important anti-inflammatory nutrient that you can get from your diet, it's omega-3 fats. They actually help to prevent and resolve inflammation in the body. I usually recommend a good supplement that has been screened for heavy metals and toxins, because nowadays, unfortunately, oily fish such as salmon, tuna, etc., can be a real source of heavy metals, which you don't want to be exposing your body to when you're trying to optimize nutrition. And in fact, NHS guidelines do advise that if you are trying to conceive, you shouldn't be having more than 1 serving of oily fish weekly. The rest of your fish intake should ideally be oily fish. A way around that, and to make sure that you do still get enough of your omega-3 fats, is to use a good high quality supplement. And again, choosing one from a brand that states that they do actually screen for heavy metals is really important. So moving on to sort of lifestyle changes that I always look at when I'm supporting someone who wants to optimize their fertility is looking at your stress levels and address your stress levels. And most individuals nowadays live in a state of chronic stress to the extent that we don't even realize we're stressed anymore. Stress can have such a powerful negative impact on our hormonal and reproductive health that it can actually negate any of the benefits of other changes that we can make to improve our health. So I see a lot of people who are trying to exercise more, they've got a good diet, they're maybe taking all the right supplements, but their stress levels are so high that it's really interfering with their ability to conceive, and it can then come along and negate a lot of the benefits that they're seeing or would potentially see as a result of their diet. Sometimes implementing diet and lifestyle changes can be stressful too. And sometimes I say to clients, you need to do less before you can do more. So you need to really assess your lifestyle, look at it, look at the things that are stressing you out and try and address those first, before you can maybe start to implement all the changes and start to make all these positive changes in your lifestyle. You need to actually give yourself a bit of a break for a few weeks, do as little as possible, get those stress levels down, and then when you feel like your nervous system's recovered a bit, then you can start to implement lots more changes. But why are we all so stressed all the time? Why are we in fight or flight all the time? So our stress response has not changed from the fight or flight response that we had when we were cavemen, whenever we had to fight or run away from our stressors. However, we no longer really need the stress response, the fight or flight response, because most of our stresses do not involve a physical response. Instead, we have the fight or flight response when we're sitting at our desk, we're in our car, or when we're in the supermarket. So we have the heart pounding, our blood sugar's going up, our blood flow is being diverted away from our internal organs to the peripheries to provide energy to run away. But we don't need any of that energy. We don't need that adrenaline. Because we're not actually going to do anything, but we just experience that stress sitting still. And we can also have physical stressors in our lifestyle as well. So a normal stress response should involve a response to a stressor, a release of stress hormones, and then the body goes back to normal once the stressor has been dealt with. However, most of us live in chronic states of stress, and these stress hormones are released all the time. And that's when stress is going to negatively impact our health. And if we also add to this chronic stress, the fact that we also put our bodies under physical stress with things such as lack of sleep. So the day after you've had not enough sleep, you're going to have more high levels of stress hormones. If you skip meals and eat too much sugar, you're going to have blood sugar imbalances and blood sugar crashes, which act as physical stressors on the body. Are you skipping meals and relying on coffee for energy? Because coffee gives you energy by releasing adrenaline, essentially putting you in fight or flight. Do you have a chronic pain or inflammatory condition? Because that's another stressor on your body. And are you exercising too hard? Because there's a very fine line between enough exercise to benefit the body and too much exercise, which could also be excessive and being a stressor on your body. And we can have a perfect storm of hormonal imbalances caused by stress. Chronic stress results in long-term high levels of cortisol, and that can negatively impact our hormonal health, causing a perfect storm of imbalances that negatively impact our reproductive health. So these are the hormonal imbalances that can be caused by having high levels of stress hormone. We could see high levels of prolactin, which interferes with progesterone and interferes with good, healthy ovulation. It causes blood sugar levels to rise and causes us to become insulin levels to rise, which we know interferes with hormone balance and interferes with egg quality. To produce cortisol, we use up steroid hormones, and that can then reduce our ability to produce our sex hormones. Cortisol can negatively impact thyroid function, and optimal thyroid function is essential for conception. We know that when we're under chronic stress, our adrenals produce less of an adrenal hormone called DHEA, and DHEA is a precursor to estrogen and testosterone. In fact, some fertility clinics in the US actually prescribe DHEA. It's so central to fertility. And stress also blocks our natural release of melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, but also very importantly, an antioxidant. So these are all, so as I said, we could be doing all the right things, eating well, taking all our supplements, exercising, and stress is going to potentially do all this in our body and really interfere with our fertility health. So what can we do about stress? We can obviously make sort of very practical changes, such as eating regularly, don't skip meals, reduce sugar and caffeine intake, as these imbalance our blood sugar and can cause to hypoglycemia, which is a stressor. Gentle exercise is key. It uses up nervous energy and it doesn't make you too stressed. It doesn't actually put you in fight or flight. And avoid the stressors that you can. For example, social media. Can you switch off some social media and doom scrolling, which could leave you feeling more stressed? Do you turn off the 24-hour news cycle? Socializing is really important, not just communicating via social media. Meeting family and friends reduces stress levels by increasing a hormone called oxytocin. Looking after the good bacteria in your digestive system can help to reduce levels of stress hormones. Mindfulness or mindful hobbies, and try to get more sleep. And we're going to talk a bit about more sleep now, because again, sleep is another really fundamental thing, often overlooked, but crucial for our reproductive health. So we all know we should be sleeping more, but sleeping, and especially the sleep hormone melatonin, is increasingly understood to play a fundamental role in our reproductive health. And we know that, again, some fertility clinics now give melatonin in supplement form. I do sometimes see some clients come to see, and they've actually purchased melatonin online and they're self-medicating with it, which I don't advise without proper observation. So I don't really advise purchasing it yourself online, which you can do, because it can lead to hormonal imbalances if you're taking too much, for example. Melatonin is a hormone that regulates our sleep cycle, and it's produced in the pineal gland of our brain. In 1942, less than 8% of the population were trying to survive on 6 hours or less sleep a night. Now in 2025, almost 50% of us are. And we know sleeping less than 6 hours can reduce your chances of conceiving by half. So there's really clear research showing this direct relationship between poor sleep and reduced fertility. So how does melatonin, the sleep hormone, affect our reproductive health? Melatonin has other roles in the body that are highly significant for reproductive health. Women who work night shifts are often known to experience menstrual irregularities. And we know that melatonin is stored in the follicular fluid, that fluid that surrounds the follicle. Why is it needed there? And we also know that the granulosa cells on the egg have melatonin receptors. Again, melatonin clearly plays a role in egg health, or we wouldn't have all this melatonin around the egg cell and on the receptors. We know that men who slept too little had a sperm count that was 29% lower than those who had a proper sleep pattern. And even animals have been shown whenever they have reduced melatonin levels. For example, when they're in a lab, they just leave the lights on all the time. Their fertility rates were reduced by half. For men, testosterone is replenished during sleep, and that's the testosterone that's used up during the day is replaced. So for men, there's a direct relationship between not enough sleep and a lack of testosterone. But why is melatonin important? Because melatonin is a potent antioxidant. Think back to the start. It protects the body's cells against the damaging effect of free radicals. Melatonin also enhances the action of other antioxidants. So if you're eating an antioxidant-rich diet, melatonin can also enhance the action of other antioxidants in the body. And it stabilizes our DNA. And this diagram is lovely because it shows how conception is essentially just the combining of DNA from an egg and a sperm cell. And DNA stability can ensure that this combination of the DNA from a sperm and egg cell can happen more effectively. So what's impacting our melatonin production? Blue light from smartphones, tablets, and laptops, especially close to bedtime. Shift work, if you have light in your bedroom at night. Lack of natural light during the day is also key. If you work in for example, an office that doesn't have a lot of natural light, because release of melatonin at night is actually dependent on complete shutdown of melatonin during the day. Stress, cortisol blocks our melatonin production, and coffee and alcohol can also interfere with our sleep patterns. And Netflix. So Netflix is the enemy of sleep, apparently. Netflix and box sets, so the 24-hour news cycle, all these things that mean we can all watch TV, hear the news and work and reply to emails at any time of day. I'm old enough to remember when this used to appear up on screen. TV was over for the day. Oh, sorry. TV was over for the day, and there was nothing more to watch. You had to go to bed and read because there was nothing else to. You couldn't shop online. You couldn't reply to emails. So we were all going to bed and sleeping much more back then. Humans are the only animal that actually forego sleep for an activity that isn't crucial to survival. So that just shows you animals are much better at these things than us. Sorry. Oh, there we go. So how do you increase melatonin levels? So sticking to a strict sleep pattern where you go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, even at weekends, has been shown to really enhance melatonin release. Melatonin release at night is dependent on complete shutdown during the day. So get out as early as possible in the day and expose yourself to bright sunlight. So even going out at lunchtime for a walk is really helpful. Avoid blue lights from laptops, smartphones, and tablets for at least 2 hours before bed, and don't use your phone as an alarm clock. You can also increase your intake of foods that are rich in melatonin. So this includes cherries. A type of cherry called Montmorency cherry is also very good. Kiwi fruit, goji berries, and walnuts. One study found that in men eating 75 grams of walnuts every day, they saw improved sperm morphology and vitality. Some natural sleep aids such as magnesium bath, lavender, or herbal teas can also help. And it can take time and effort to get a good sleep pattern if you have a poor one at the moment. It's been shown to take up to 90 days to achieve a good sleep pattern. So don't give up. It will work eventually. It can just take time. So how do we put all this together? What we've talked about today. I always say start by addressing stress and trying to improve your sleep pattern. Remember, all other changes are going to be secondary to this because stress can just come along and negate all of it. Increase dietary intake of antioxidants by increasing spices and fruits and vegetables. Try and think of yourself as a vegetarian who eats meat as a side order. Reduce intake of refined carbs and sugar. And make sure you're getting enough of the key nutrients for reproductive health from your diet or through a quality supplement, and ideally through both. So how can your ethnic background impact your fertility? So I wanted to look at a few key areas that I know of in the research that shows how certain ethnic minorities may be predisposed to certain physiological imbalances and how this might impact reproductive health and fertility. So I want to focus in on methylation and MTHFR gene, blood sugar and insulin resistance, vitamin D and the UK climate, the vaginal microbiome, and elevated estrogen levels. These are 5 key areas that I know of research where your background and your genetic predisposition might be interfering with, potentially interfering with your fertility. So MTHFR and methylation. So if you think back to, I talked about how vitamin B12 and folate were essential for the methylation process, and this diagram shows you the methylation process. Certain ethnic groups are more predisposed to genetic imbalances in the methylation process. So I mentioned how about 40% of the people on the island of Ireland, where I live, are predisposed to have poor methylation, but other ethnic groups as well are known to have poor activity of the MTHFR gene, and that means you do not methylate effectively, and this can have a negative impact on your fertility health, leading to high homocysteine levels. So, for example, backgrounds such as Hispanic, white, and Southeast Asian and East Asian heritage are more likely to have inherited MTHFR defects. So, if you do come from one of those backgrounds, you may want to check. Do a genetic test to check your MTHFR ability. Are you methylating properly? Do you have an imbalance there, and could it be potentially impacting your fertility? And if so, there's plenty you can do about it. You just can make sure that you're supplementing with the appropriate forms of folate and B12 to support your methylation, and eating other foods that can also support methylation activity as well. There are other cofactors that come into the methylation cycle, for example, B6, choline, magnesium, zinc can also help as well. Blood sugar and insulin resistance. So if you think back to the earlier slides, I talked about the importance of having healthy blood sugar levels and avoiding high insulin levels. So some individuals, because of their ethnic background, are genetically predisposed to develop something called insulin resistance. And this is where the cells of the body do not respond well to the activity of insulin. So after a meal containing carbs, your blood sugar and your insulin levels remain high. So this leads to someone with insulin resistance will produce more insulin after a meal containing carbs than someone who is not insulin resistant. And this then can interfere with your blood sugar levels and also your fertility and hormone balance. So we know that individuals with African and South Asian heritage are genetically predisposed to develop insulin resistance and to develop it younger. So this can result in higher blood sugar levels and insulin levels that can interfere with fertility. And due to this genetic predisposition, you might need to be stricter with dietary interventions to prevent high blood sugar and to prevent insulin resistance, and maybe potentially to treat insulin resistance. So again, genetic predisposition for insulin resistance could potentially predispose to PCOS or poor egg and sperm quality in women and men. I have worked with some clients with South Asian heritage who had high blood sugar and had developed insulin resistance, and they were quite young. And I would say that we were able to improve their insulin resistance with the right interventions, with the right supplements and exercise, etc. But I would say it was quite difficult, and we had to work that bit harder to get that insulin resistance and to get that blood sugar under control. So you may just have to be that bit stricter with your dietary interventions to get the blood sugar under control if you are genetically predisposed. And vitamin D in the UK climate. So living in the UK, especially the more northern latitudes, such as Northern Ireland, where I'm from, or Scotland, predisposes to vitamin D deficiency for everyone, but especially for those with darker skin tones, because you've got more melanin, and those who cover up for cultural reasons. So I always say test, don't guess. So if you're living in the UK, but you have a darker skin tone, your melanin levels in your skin are giving you a natural protection against UV rays, but that natural protection is also preventing the vitamin D production from those UV rays. So you're going to need more of our sunlight to actually stimulate your vitamin D production. If you have to cover up when you're outside for cultural reasons, you're also not going to get that natural vitamin D from the sun. Maybe you can only get it whenever you're in a private garden, for example. So it's going to be really important for you to look at your vitamin D levels, test them regularly as well, to make sure that you are maintaining those vitamin D levels. On top of this, some ethnic minorities, for example, 60% of African heritage, have defects in the genes that help produce vitamin D receptors. And that means you may need even more, because it means your vitamin D receptors that pick up and respond to vitamin D are actually not as effective. I personally have just found out that I have a faulty genetic predisposition with my vitamin D receptor. So I'm trying to sort of really optimize and work with my vitamin D levels for this reason. So it's a very interesting test to have done, knowing that I maybe need more vitamin D than someone else who has good vitamin D receptor genes. And an interesting area that is really emerging in female fertility is actually the vaginal microbiome. So perhaps we're all aware of the microbiome, which is the population of good bacteria in our guts that we know are very helpful for our digestive health. But our vaginal area has also got a microbiome, a population of good bacteria that is resident there and keeps it healthy. And in my experience, the vaginal microbiome is crucially important for female fertility because the vaginal microbiome can control levels of inflammation and the health of the vaginal area, and it can support implantation and improve pregnancy outcomes. When I'm working with clients, I now test the vaginal microbiome of every one of my fertility clients, whether they're trying to conceive through assisted conception or naturally, because a healthy vaginal microbiome is, in my opinion, a really, really crucial area of our female fertility. Interestingly, our ethnicity can also dictate the nature of our vaginal microbiome and the type of bacteria that might be dominant there. And this could then impact our fertility. So researchers found that different characteristic populations of bacteria are associated with different ethnic minorities. So the vaginal microbiome can be different in different ethnic groups, and this is called community state types. For example, white and Asian women are more likely to have community state types dominated by lactobacillus, which is a very beneficial strain that produces more acid and prevents overgrowth from potentially negative bacteria. So that is a more positive community state type for the vaginal microbiome. Hispanic and Black women are more likely to have community state types dominated by lactobacillus iners, which is a form of lactobacillus, but is not as beneficial as other lactobacillus strains. So if that's dominant, it's not the worst vaginal microbiome, but it may not be as positive as some other strains of lactobacillus. And women of African ancestry are more likely to have community state type number 4, which is deficient in lactobacillus species and more predisposed to bacterial vaginosis, which can then have a negative impact on chances of implantation and conception. However, I would say testing the vaginal microbiome of my clients, very few people have perfect or very healthy vaginal microbiomes, potentially because of overuse of antibiotics or various reasons. So with most clients, we'll be working to rebalance the vaginal microbiome with specific probiotics that can reach the vagina and really maintain a healthy microbiome. And as I said, I do that with all my clients now for about 3 months prior to conception. So if that's going to be assisted conception or trying to conceive naturally, we'll work to support a really healthy vaginal microbiome. And estrogen, so this is my last slide. And when Jenny asked me to come along to talk today, she asked me to sort of address potential reasons why some ethnic minorities might be more prone to conditions such as fibroids and endometriosis. And those are both estrogen dominant conditions. And some ethnic groups are known to have elevated levels of estrogen compared to other ethnic groups, especially those of African and East Asian heritage. Women of African and East Asian heritage are known to have higher levels of estrogen at all times during the menstrual cycle compared to women from other ethnic groups. This is partly linked to reduced activity of a gene called CYP1B1, which supports the breakdown of estrogen. So these women are producing estrogen, but they're having slower breakdown of estrogen, and this is leading to higher levels potentially circulating in their bloodstream. So this could be one reason for an increased incidence of estrogen-dominant conditions such as endometriosis and fibroids. And in these conditions, estrogen can contribute to proliferation of cells. So it could be causing more endometrial tissue, driving growth of fibroids. However, we can use nutrition to partly help balance out estrogen production and try and stimulate and drive estrogen breakdown. So by consuming broccoli or vegetables from the broccoli family every day, these are an absolute superfood when it comes to balancing estrogens. We can help to reduce estrogen level and support estrogen breakdown in the body. Avoid alcohol. There's a direct relationship between the more alcohol we drink and estrogen levels increasing. You want to fill up on fiber because estrogen is actually detoxified by our gut. So in the bile flow, so if we've got plenty of fiber in our digestive system, it will mop up the estrogen that's being excreted and it'll leave the body via our stools. Flax seeds are a really important food and also high fiber that can help to reduce estrogen levels in our bloodstream, and avoiding sugar, because as we saw, too much sugar leads to a decrease in sex hormone binding globulin, and that will then exacerbate these high levels of estrogen, because when we've got low sex hormone binding globulin, we've got more free and active estrogen or other hormones in the bloodstream. So too much sugar can potentially exacerbate the activity of this high estrogen in the bloodstream. So that was my last slide. This is my contact details if anyone has any questions outside of today and wants to get in touch potentially privately. But we are open now to a bit of a Q&A, so I'm just going to stop the share and hopefully open that up. Okay, so yes, and as Carla said, you can put your questions in the chat, or if you want to ask, I think you can put up your hand or...
I was going to say, Sarah, thank you very much for that presentation. That was amazing. Even for
Tried to cover a
myself,
lot.
who, yeah, I mean, I'm sure that lots of people have learned quite a lot from the presentation. And it's interesting to hear, obviously, the struggles from the ethnic minority as well, what they might, you know, sort of conditions and struggles, and the vitamin D. So it's really, really helpful.
What's really interesting is with the whole genetic side of things, you know, some people, you know, we all think we inherit our genes and that's what we've got for the rest of our lives and there's nothing we can do about it. But there's also something called epigenetics, where our diet and our lifestyle actually helps to modulate the activity of those genes, which is something I would look at quite a lot as well. So, you know, as I said, yes, you've inherited those genes, but there's a lot you can do to actually, you know, potentially, you know, either reduce, you know, the negative impact of those genes with diet and lifestyle.
Yeah,